A note to our listeners before we begin the show. This episode may contain triggering and sensitive topics, including abuse, trauma, and addiction. Please take care while listening to this episode or switch to a different episode that is more suitable for you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Chats with Kat. I am your host, Kat. Don't forget to grab your coffee, tea, or preferred beverage and settle on in. I am currently here with Rita, who is a veterinary nurse. Welcome to the show. So, Rita, will you please introduce yourself to those who are listening?
Hello, my name is Rita. My birth name is Margarita, but I never really liked it, so I go by Rita. I was adopted from Russia when I was 7 years old, and I currently live in San Diego now, and I have never left San Diego.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's get into, you said you were adopted at 7. So what was your experience like? Like, how much do you remember and everything?
So when I don't really remember much of my adoption, like what happened when I was there. I do remember like the first visit and me coming to the US, but I don't really remember how it was like. I do remember though that my parents never really interacted with me. They more likely interacted with the translator to me. So I never got that like, oh my God, these are going to be my forever parents, potentially. I never felt that way when I was there, when I was at the orphanage. And I actually didn't even think I was ever going to be adopted because the orphanage was like, oh, we've already had multiple families try to adopt you, but none of them wanted you. So it was just kind of like, okay.
So they would tell you that like in the orphanage, like you spoke with these people, but they don't want you, sort of thing.
Yeah, we spoke with these people. We've had like families come up and they don't want you because of your medical issues and stuff.
So how did that make you feel, like hearing that?
It felt kind of upsetting because I did not want to be in the orphanage for the rest. I didn't want to age out of the orphanage, and I've already been there for like 7 years. I didn't want to have another like 8 or 9 years until they kick me out. But then there are times where the parents who did choose me, I kind of wish I didn't move abroad because I lost a lot of my culture and my friends and everything. So that kind of didn't really benefit me at all either.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point we'll definitely touch on.
Mm-hmm.
What is your first memory from meeting your adoptive parents?
My mom gave me a teddy bear that I still have today.
Yeah.
I also remember those really old cameras where you can only have like 20 photos.
Yes.
I didn't know what it was. And I just remember in like a closet going around in circles taking photos and not knowing what it was.
Right.
And so that whole camera was just filled with pictures of a closet.
Oh, I love
and
that.
Those are like the things I remember. I remember my first bath too, which was really weird. My parents said that I was really dirty, like the water was brown when I took my first like shower outside the orphanage and stuff. So I kind of remember that, but I don't really remember like the whole like leaving the orphanage, getting to taking the train to Moscow and then flying to the US. I don't remember any of that.
Yeah,
really.
See, that's really interesting. The fact that the water was brown, my own personal adoption story, my adoptive parents told me that I was very malnourished. And
I was, I was, when they have a doctor, so part of the adoption system, they have like what I call pediatrician come and like check me out, how healthy I am. I was fairly healthy, but she did mention that I was more of a typical 3-year-old size than a 7-year-old. So I don't know how that complains. I was like 4'2", but I was like 28 pounds when I should have been like 40 pounds.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a very, I'm not sure how common it is. It's actually something that I've never really touched on before, but you mentioned it, so it reminded me of my own story, and I'm kind of curious if other adoptee stories are also in that particular area. whether you're from Russia or from a different country. I would be curious to know.
I was told I was in one of the nicer orphanages, so I was lucked out where we had like better food and better like equipment for all the kids, but it wasn't like what I have now here
Right.
in the US.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my adoptive sister, she was worse. I remember when I went to when we went to adopt her in 2012, right before the ban happened.
Right.
She would only eat like the fruits and veggies. She would never touch any of the meat because the meat was always like spoiled. And she was like really, really pale and malnourished. It's like super different compared to what she looks now.
Yeah.
It took her almost a year to like actually have her start eating meat again. So it was kind of crazy.
So are you close with your adoptive sister? Were you adopted from like a similar area?
Different areas. It's more of kind of like a parental kind of relationship because she is disabled and stuff, so she's not able to process things normally. So I have to kind of be more of a parent to her than like a sister or a friend.
Right.
Oftentimes.
Okay.
And we have different personalities. She's like outgoing, rather do shopping and hang out with friends. I'm more introverted. So I don't know if that plays a role for me from my orphanage and stuff.
Right.
Just because my orphanage said that I was rambunctious, I was crazy, I would talk a lot, do everything, but then I'm now 23 and then I'm like the total opposite of what the orphanage said I was.
So what was it like for you when you came to the States?
I remember I came in February and literally a week later I was put in school.
Yes.
At my orphanage, I was told we don't start school for the orphans until they're like late 7 years or 8 years old.
Yes.
So I had no clue what was happening. I remember they put me in first grade. I was in first grade for the last month or two of school. So I remember having tantrums in school, not understanding anybody. I was sent to the principal's office at least once a week for nothing. And no one could communicate with me because no one actually took the time to get a translator to help me understand what was happening in school.
Wow.
And so they expected me to already know English and already know everything.
Yeah.
I had to be in that dual enrollment program where every year I had to take an English
Yes.
English test.
Yes.
The English test, I failed it 7 times. I think
Yeah.
it was 6th or 7th grade. I finally passed it, and I didn't have to go to the reading teacher anymore. I didn't have to go to the speaking teacher anymore. So I wasn't sure if that was because I had developmental issues from Russia or something, because my Russian wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't speaking like a 7-year-old Russian. I was speaking more of someone that's maybe a toddler, very childish, not sophisticated like a 7-year-old would talk. So not at all. Yeah.
You have a similar story to me. I was in the orphanage until around that age as well. I was adopted later. And Russian was one of my first languages, and I had to come over and learn English. I had to unlearn Russian, learn English, and now I'm trying to relearn Russian, and I don't know, be a dual linguist. And you touched on something that's very important, where when you come to a country and you don't speak the language, it is very frustrating. I too had these sort of outbursts in school because no one would understand me. For me, I was picked on quite a bit, but nobody really understood what I was saying, or, I wouldn't speak like I'm speaking now. There was an accent of sorts because English words are difficult, right? So
yeah, I can't pronounce words like burger. I can't say that word. I can't say hamburger correctly. Everyone thinks I'm saying something different.
Right. So how did that?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
It was difficult. I would say it took me until 5th or 6th grade until I was actually in coursework that was with my peers rather than doing special education. And so I was very happy to not have to leave my elementary school class and then have to go to a specialist for 2 hours a day.
Right.
So that's great. I always had a difficulty time with English. I think my average grade in English throughout my entire school time was a C-.
Right.
So I don't know if learning it later and not understanding it really well played a role in me, or in my ADHD brain. I have ADHD and I couldn't focus on anything.
Right.
Played a benefit. So yeah.
Were you a part of like different clubs or anything like that? Were you?
In high school, I lost a lot of my hearing, or starting like I would say not high school, but I had a very difficult time hearing throughout most of my childhood and adulthood.
Right.
So I relied more on sign language and
Oh,
American Sign Language than speaking
okay.
back then, because it was just easier to sign and communicate that way than try to hear what someone's saying and then having to repeat myself, what did you say? So that always played a very annoying part of it for my childhood.
So that's very interesting for me because I feel like I say that's very interesting, but I see such a correlation. For you, you picked sign language. For me, I went completely mute for many years of my life, and I actually really worked on writing, and I was able to really hone down my English, and that was the way that I communicated to people, was through being mute and just writing. So it's interesting to me that you went through something kind of similar, but even though it's in a different way, because it was a lot. It was a lot. And instead of listening, and for me, like, I felt like my voice wasn't heard, so why talk at all? It was like, I understand what you're saying, where it's like you use sign language to communicate. I definitely understand that. And I think it's very interesting. I wonder if other adoptees have also like chosen something like this as well.
Yeah, or I did go through a path, I think more of my high school years where I did lie a lot about like my upbringing and like, oh, like I don't have any parents, they're like dead, I'm just an orphan.
Yeah.
So I did go through that whole phase,
Right.
try to get some sympathy from kids who grew up with their families the whole entire lives.
Yes. I get that. Totally.
Yeah, that did not go so well for me.
Right.
Yeah, my parents put me in therapy because of that
Right.
mainly.
Right.
That, and I don't know if it was because of my accent or not me speaking well English, but I didn't make many friends in like elementary, middle, and high school. I lasted 2 years in my public high school, and then I decided to get like homeschooled the last 2 years because I just hated it.
Right.
And the coursework was too fast. It was like you take 8 courses in a span of like 4 months, and then the next 4 months you take a whole new 8 courses, kind of like university like, but
Yeah.
we're 14 to 18-year-olds, not 18 to 22-year-olds.
Right.
That was difficult for me.
I can understand that. Also, like, do you feel that being homeschooled made you miss out on the social life of being in school?
I didn't really miss it because I was bullied a lot, so it kind of benefited me.
Yeah.
And my GPA grade went up because when I left public school, I had like a 2.0. When I graduated, I went to like a 3.2. So I was happy with what happened.
Yeah.
And stuff. And it was more like one-on-one teaching, I guess. More one-on-one to one to two teacher ratio teaching. So it benefited me than staying in a class with 50 other kids and not hearing anything the teacher said.
Yes. No, I definitely understand that as well, wholeheartedly. I always do well, even with groups of people. I do better when it's just a one-on-one interaction. When it's a multiple group sort of thing, I really do get a lot of anxiety, and it comes out in a lot of different ways that aren't necessarily the best or productive. People sometimes feel that I'm being too much or mean or whatever it is, but I don't do well in like I don't do well in a group setting unless it's just like a one-on-one conversation. Maybe 2 to 1, and that's it.
I've been told that a lot of the way I interact is very Russian-like, and a lot of people are like, you should be more empathetic or more American. Like, how do you feel like that person feels communicating with you when you're so like blunt or so like, oh, can you do this for me? And not actually see how they're feeling. So I get that a lot from people, and I'm like, I'm trying.
That's funny because
at work, especially, I work with dogs, so there was times where I was like, hey, can you like make sure you write where the dogs go to and not just like make everyone wonder where they are. And so a bunch of people came up to me and was like, I didn't like how you approached her that way. And I was like, well, I don't know how to approach her in a better way.
Yeah.
She keeps doing it.
Yeah, I feel like that goes into some of the Russian stereotypes, right? Every country has stereotypes. Everybody experiences stereotypes from other people, and it's really unfortunate. For me, I think the hardest thing is that because I worked so hard, going back to your point about like lying and trying to gain that sympathy from other people, it's a people pleasing gesture. I
Yeah.
I feel many adoptees understand that, right? Where it's this sort of conundrum where you don't want to get too close to people, but you also want the friends, and you'll do whatever it takes to get them.
Yeah, and
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
avoidant attachment.
Yes. So that's also
we want the attachment, but we avoid everything related to emotions and stuff.
Yes. And it's funny because people don't realize that, but I always say like I'm an antisocial extrovert, and I've said this for many, many years. I've said it since like fourth, fifth, I don't even know what grade, I can't remember, but like, like a younger grade.
I always say I'm an omnivore, which is like in between an extrovert and an introvert.
Yeah.
Because there are days where I want to go and do things, and then there are days where I'm like, I just don't want to be around anybody.
Right. So it's interesting because like when you have this perception, you see, this is where I feel like you're different from me in a very positive way, where I feel that, and this is just the way that I was raised by my adoptive family. So I'm curious how your adoptive mom and your sister contributed to this, if at all. I was raised where you have to be, I was always overly empathetic because I was overly a people pleasing person, right? And I overly very much cared. And to many Russians, that's a very American thing. But they don't know that it's something that is very surface level for me. You go in deeper and it's like nothing.
For me, it's like I can hit the iceberg, but I can never go under the iceberg with people.
Right.
That's how I kind of viewed my relationship.
Yeah, there's levels. Like there's strict levels for me as well.
Yeah, like I can't even get vulnerable with my parents, with my mom and sister. It's too difficult.
Yeah, I get that. I felt that way about certain family members as well. But okay, so knowing you were like this, you said you went into therapy. And how did your adoptive mom react, and how did your sister react as well? Like, did they understand?
I've been in therapy since I was like 7.
Yeah.
Literally when I was adopted, they threw me right into therapy as soon as I came to the US. So
yeah,
it's like I've always been in therapy. I've never had like real therapy. A lot of it the first couple years I remember was more like the therapy was more like, oh, how is she, like how to get her assimilated into a family and like her to understand like what it is a family is and stuff. And then the other ones and then later on it started going to like trauma, generational trauma, and then just like working on my like anxiety and depression and things like that.
Yeah, see, that's interesting because I didn't have that. That was not made available to me. And I think that's even though it was difficult to receive, I think for you, it's a very good resource to have for adoptees. I didn't have that. And my parents didn't believe in therapy. And when I started going to therapy, all the therapists I went to told me that I was very broken and I was beyond mending.
There was one, I did this like EMDR course.
Right.
Where we do like rapid eye movement stuff. Literally by my 3rd session, he was like, you're cured. Oh my gosh. And I was like, we didn't even hit anything that's happened in my life. From the abuse I had as a child to the abuse at the orphanage and to the like my parents giving me up and stuff. Like we didn't. And so there were moments where I just kind of stopped trusting in them. And then I recently started going back more, and then more working on like relational therapy rather than just the whole like trauma therapy stuff.
Right. That is something that many people don't speak of and speak about is the things that happen in the orphanages. I got in touch with my biological brother. He was in the orphanage until he was 18. He went through the whole system, and he was telling me a lot of the different things that had happened. And it was a very, I think we had it worse in the orphanages. I don't think people, his story is so sad. And
My mom was kicked out at 16 from the orphanage.
right.
And pregnant with me, literally, like a few months after she was kicked out.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, my sister came. And so,
yeah, it's just sad.
And her husband, he's not my biological dad, my sister's dad. He gave them a lot of trauma and stuff too. So she's kind of like, doesn't really want to do anything with me, but she also doesn't want to talk about her past and why she gave me up and stuff. So that's been difficult to try to talk about with her.
So you're.
I had a detective in the Facebook group help me find her.
Got it.
Earlier this year, I think I found her in like January or February.
Right.
Can't remember. It went well for like the first few or 3 days, and then after that, she was just like, "What do you want from me?"
Right.
So it started going downhill, and I've kind of just like not really talk to her at all. And whenever I do talk to her, she always either is
dismissive,
trying to not answer your questions, or just put it on me and like, why do you need to know this? I already told you everything.
Yeah. So that's also something that many adoptees don't know about, is when you go and find your family, we often think that it's going to be this really beautiful, happy ending. And a lot of the time it's not. It's not a happy ending. You know what I mean?
She also never told my sister that I existed until I reached out to them.
Right.
So my sister thought she was an only child for her 21 years of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I reached out, they both thought I was a scammer.
Yeah.
They also mentioned a lot of things that didn't go along with my paperwork about my adoption, like my birth and how I was given up and things like that. They said that I like died in the hospital,
right?
But my paperwork says that my birth mom kept me for like 6-8 months,
right?
And then took me to the orphanage, and then said she would come back in like a year. And when that year happened, she ended up giving up her parental rights. That's what the paperwork said. But she was like, at 2 weeks old, they said that you need to go to surgery and you were going to die. And so I had to give up my parental rights. And so that was been hard to comprehend. So I don't know if she's lying or if my paperwork's lying. So that's the difficulty.
So that's the hard part too, because the same thing happened in my paperwork, and it made me very angry. I also asked my biological brother about it. And at the time that my biological mother was alive, we asked her, and she told us a different story to that. So I don't know how accurate this is, but I know that in Russia particularly, they would say and do anything to have the child adopted in the paperwork and all of that sort of stuff. Oftentimes the paperwork is really not accurate. Now, I can't speak. Okay, so adoptee community, I'm not speaking for all of you. I promise you, especially for the Russian adoptee community that may be listening. I am only speaking to those of us who we have found out the strong inconsistencies within the paperwork. So please don't feel upset about what I have just said. It's different situation for everyone. And I just know that for my paperwork, for your paperwork, for other people's paperwork that I've known, it's a different story. And that makes it even harder kind of to cope with and deal with, when you get older and you have this sort of non-existent existing relationship with your biological family. And then you see the paperwork and there's the inconsistency and the uncertainty and the not knowing why, kind of like, how does that I know how it makes me feel, but how does that make you feel?
I've been upset about it. I don't know if I'm more upset about me with myself for never knowing, like, oh, this is it, or upset with her for just like, or the Russian government for just putting together paperwork that may or may not be true.
Right.
Yeah, she also mentioned there's a city that it says that her entire family's from. She said they were like refugees from like an ethnic minority in Russia, and to protect themselves from getting killed in like the 80s and 90s, they had to create like fake passports and like fake birth certificates. And so she went on this whole thing, was like, yeah, we were like being killed by the Russian government and everything. And so everything that's on your birth certificate and everything that's on my birth certificate is not true. We're not even Russian. We're like this and this. And so I don't really know, like, if she's crazy or whatever.
Right.
There are some, like, I've looked into it more. Like, she did say that her dad was Latvian, and so that did come out true. But the things that I never understood is how she was raised Muslim, but I came out ethnically Jewish. So
Right.
So it's like different religions, how like she's Muslim, yet I'm Jewish ethnically and religiously. And I'm like, so who and I like, did your family not know you were Jewish or what happened and stuff like that?
Right. It's hard when you don't know like the whole family history.
And I also found out I was indigenous too. I was Erzyan, which is like an indigenous tribe
Yes.
to Mordovia, something like that.
Yes.
And so I know in like the US, they don't adopt indigenous children to non-indigenous people. So I wonder what Russia's view on indigenous children is.
Right.
So that's been kind of interesting to learn about and stuff.
What I'm thinking about is how different your personal makeup is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the empty space and the uncertainty that it kind of leaves. Do you feel that because there's so many unanswered questions that this has hindered or hurt you more so in any way?
As an international adoptee and not knowing answers, I feel like it's hurt me because I don't have the answers. Like I remember in elementary school, they would do that project, do your family line.
Yes.
Like where's all your family from, like your history. And there were kids in my class who would have family dating back to the pilgrimage, and then kids who have like family. And then there's me, and I'm like, I just have my mom, my sister, and I don't even know if at the time I didn't even know if I had a dad, who my dad was. She said the guy on my birth certificate is not my father. She said that the hospital just wrote a random birth certificate for me, and also the name that I was given is not the name she gave me. So I was given the name Margarita, but she says my name, I was named after like her grandmother. I forgot, it was another M name, but it was like a very like Muslim name. I can't remember it, but it was not Margarita. And I just was like, so I'm like, if you had my name, why wouldn't the hospital put that name if you said that was my name and stuff? So that also didn't make sense. And it's like, why would you talk about me being named this? She also said I was born with like black hair, really pale. I'm blonde hair, blue eyed. I'm a little pale in the wintertime. But I'm pretty in the summertime. Yeah, like I don't look anything like my mom, but I do look exactly like my sister. So I'm just like, where's all these like black hair coming from? Because I don't have baby pictures, so I don't know. Cause, yeah, and another thing that doesn't make sense is the orphanage I was adopted up from doesn't even know where I came from. Like they said that they don't have any records of the baby home I was from, because when I was adopted, I was in the adult, kind of like the older adoptee. So anyone from age 7 to 18, that was the orphanage I was at. But they don't have any records of the orphanage I was from 4 months or 5 months to 2 or 3. I don't know when I came. So it's just like, where's like all this paperwork that I should have that I don't have?
Right. Yeah. Ugh.
And I've even asked my orphanage director, because my mom and her have been in contact for years. I was like, do you guys even know like what orphanage I came from? And she was like, Yeah, you just appeared one day and you were just with us for like 3 or 4 years, but we didn't get any paperwork from your baby orphanage.
Wow. It's so irresponsible, but I don't think that.
I have a theory of a few because
Go ahead. Yeah.
there are like a few within that area that are baby homes. I was thinking maybe there was one called Porchery Baby Home in Pskov, Russia. So I have a theory that I might have come from down because that one's like the biggest baby home, and then literally like a few kilometers away from the orphanage I was adopted from. So that was like the most likelihood. But then, yeah, that was the most likelihood because the city the baby home is was the city I was born in, but the place I was adopted from was not the city I was born in, too. So it
Yeah.
was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's also something that happened to me where I was born in Domodedovo, but I was adopted from a different place in Moscow.
Mhm.
So I totally get that.
Yeah, and another thing before I knew like about the whole like my birth mom's family like lying about their birth certificate, I never understood like how did they go all the way from like Leningrad, which is way up north near like Finland, all the way down
Yeah.
to like Pskov. Like how did they move like 800 kilometers? Like what was she doing? Like how was she born up there and I'm down here? Like and then it kind of makes sense. So I was like, where did like or Novgorod or whatever that city up there is near like
Yeah.
St. Petersburg. So yeah, I always wondered like what was she doing like in the period from birth to 18 or 16 to go from all the way up at the top of Russia to the bottom of Russia. So that's
Right.
what interested me.
Yeah. Well, where do you see yourself in your journey in trying to figure out this information?
I don't have contact with her. I've tried to ask answers about my father, who he could be. The only thing she said is when he found out I was sick, he left, and she hasn't seen him since I was born.
Right.
She never gave me a name. She never said where he's from or anything. So that's the thing. And then I don't really know how I'm gonna go about it because her and my half sister aren't giving answers at all. And then
Right.
I don't have anybody else to ask for answers.
Right. So, in terms of yourself as an adopted individual, you said I know that not having the answers feels like there's a hole there still. But I'd like to take a moment to ask you, how have you changed from when you came here to who you are now?
I think it helped me grow as an individual because for me, I feel like I've become more of an interesting person than someone who's stayed in like the same place their whole life.
Right.
And like I could be like, oh yeah, this is my family story and this is what happened, kind of. And it helped me grow because I had to learn a new language, come to a new country, um, and then try to build a connection with my birth family and financiers, and then getting half the answers, but not really all. And then from that, getting a more better understanding of like, oh, this is where I'm from and like what my story is, kind of.
Right. I'm actually curious. What was your experience? Did you have to get a citizenship in the States?
So I remember so my parents did 3 visits. The first was to visit me. The second was a court visit. So they went to the
Yeah.
court where they did the adoption process, and the Russian government said yes, she can be adopted. And then I think between that period and the third visit, which is the visit where I went home, I think that's a span of like, because of 3 or 4 months, they
Right.
did the U.S. naturalization period where I got my U.S. passport done. Because I remember I think they used my Russian passport pictures because it's the same on both my U.S. and Russian passport at that time. Yeah, and I think because they were already American citizens, the adoption automatically made me an American citizen. I never had to go do the nationalization test that a lot of immigrants have to do,
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The only thing that they did worry about was she going to like have a dual citizenship or is America gonna let her keep her Russian citizenship, because it's like in Russia, if you're born there, you're a citizen, no matter
Yes.
what your parents are.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you ever considered getting the dual citizenship?
I have I consider myself dual because of it. I just have to have a proof of citizenship done with an embassy, and I just haven't renewed my Russian passport because I haven't had any means of going to Russia in the last 15, 16 years that I've been here.
Yeah, same. Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm like, maybe one day if I want to travel there, I would go, but I don't really want to go there now. Like if
Right.
and my family was like, why do you want to come? I did say I mentioned like when I first went, like, oh, I want to go to Russia. Want to meet you guys? And then my mom had a whole out. My birth mom had a full on like, why the hell do you want to come here? Like, do you know how hard it is for us to live in Russia, and all this whole spiel about
Wow. I
Russia?
didn't expect that.
And so I was kind of disappointed because would have thought she would have been excited for me to come to Russia and see her, but she was more she kind of was angry about the fact that I wanted to go there and stuff. So then it kind of dissuaded me from getting my passport and everything.
Yeah. Oh, see, oh gosh, I didn't expect that either. Again, it just goes back to the whole like happy ending sort of scenario that so many adoptees have, and they don't consider like these options when they're looking for their families. And when potentially that happens, it's devastating. It's very, very hurtful.
Yeah, which was really interesting because like the first 2 or 3 days we were communicating, she was like, I want you to come live with me, take care of me. I want you to like there's a university in our town that you can go to and finish your schooling, and like you can get to know your sister and everything. And then I got really busy, and I think for like 3 or 4 weeks I didn't message her, and she didn't message me. And then when I messaged her, she got really mad at me for like, why didn't message me and all these things. And then it's just been downhill ever since then. And that last conversation was like, oh, who was my dad? Like, I want to know about him. Like, do you know him? And then she kind of, I wouldn't say blocked me, but was just like I gave you all my answers that I know of. I'm telling the truth. I don't lie. But I think I don't know. It's like a very Russian thing to not trust like the uh, government hospitals. She also has a thing against wealthy people. So she must, because she thinks I'm in America, she must think I'm very wealthy and stuff. I did mention to her that I was Jewish. She flipped out. She was like, you shouldn't be Jewish because of what's happening in the world because of Jews. You should convert to Muslim. I'm Muslim. My daughter's Muslim. My dad's Muslim. Like, we're all Muslim. Like, why are you Muslim? Why aren't you Muslim? That whole thing. Um, yeah, so there's just been red flags from her and things like that. That there have been times where, like, if she wanted to continue, I would have been happy, but the red flags have been like, I don't really know if I really want to consider her as my parent.
So I think that's also a very crucial thing that you said, and to me that's very much progress. That's progress for you, and it's a very difficult road to go down, but it's an important one where you have to make the decision as the adoptee, right? Not everyone gets on with their biological family, and what you just said is very powerful because it brings the power back to you in a lot of different ways. Sometimes we just need to be able to see that, right? So because you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't consider her my biological parent. It will hurt, but it also will heal, and it'll take some time. But you're comfortable where you're at right now with who you are, with your religion, with your adoptive mother and your adoptive sister, and the way that they treat you, and that sort of life. And it's important to consider that as well, you know? So I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for who you were. I'm proud of you for getting to where you are now and who you are now. And I'm proud of you because you're trying to become someone great and you're well on your way. Sometimes the healing just takes a little bit longer, you know? So don't worry. And I'm also really curious, how has being a veterinary nurse helped you through just all these different emotions?
I have a better relationship with animals than people.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
And I don't know if it's because I'm like neurodivergent and stuff, and I have I understand animals better than I understand like a very angry person. Like there are times where someone could be mad at me, and I would be like, not even have a clue that they're upset with me. And so I asked. It started with like rescuing animals. My mom has a rescue, doesn't have a rescue, but she's part of rescue in San Diego, and we fostered a few dogs throughout the years. And I did try to go to university. COVID happened, and when that happened, I went on a medical leave and kind of dropped out of school. And at that time, I was studying to be a marine biologist. So I knew then I wanted to do something with animals. But after that, I was like, I don't have the expenses to pay for a 4-year college. Like, what's the next best thing?
Right.
And the vet tech's only like 2 years, but I still get to work in a hospital more hands-on than the veterinarian, even though the veterinarians get paid like three figures. I get paid like $20 an hour. But
I totally understand what you mean when you say that you get along better with animals than with people. I'm the same way. And that whole like neurodivergent thing, I think many of us as adoptees have that. And it's people can say it's a curse. I see it as a blessing. It's almost like I speak my own language, and the people who I do let into my life speak cat. You know what I mean? So it's a very unique thing. And I think it's something that we should use to empower ourselves, because while not everyone is going to understand you, but there are some of us out there who will know exactly what you mean. You don't even need to finish your sentence. Like sometimes you were, even in this interview, you're talking and you mention something and I'm like, totally get what you're saying. Totally feel that right here. I got you. You know, it's a very nice feeling. Right. So I love that you're involved with animals. Also, I love that your adoptive mom does animal rescue, because animals are the best therapy in the world. For me, I would rather see, and I would rather have animals than go to a therapist. But there's also other ways that you can help yourself get to a better place other than therapy. But that's a conversation for a totally different day.
yeah, equestrian horse therapy helped me a lot too.
Yeah.
Because horses have the same empathetic feelings of humans. So when we feel angry, they feel anger. When we're upset, they feel scared. And so when we try to focus our emotions towards the horse and feel how the horse is feeling, I've grown a lot as a person than being angry at like someone and them being like angry back at me. Yeah.
So something that I'm curious about is many adoptees do have different relationships with their adoptive family. It makes me really happy that you have a very strong connection with your adoptive mom. My connection with my adoptive mother was a little bit more tumultuous, which means difficult.
Mhm.
It was either a very good day or it was a very bad day. I was much closer to my adoptive dad. When they both passed away, I'm no longer in contact with my adoptive family, because they told me, you're adopted and you are not blood. And so you do not deserve anything. So I'm curious as to just kind of like your thoughts. And I know you had like a question. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that.
Yeah, I have a pretty strong relationship with one of my parents. The other parent, I don't even know how Russia allowed him to adopt, because they have a very strong issue with alcohol abuse and addiction, and he had a bunch of addictions that it just kind of went over, and then I guess he lied to the courts and said, "Oh, I'm clean and everything, haven't done it," and yet his addiction kept getting worse and worse, developed into other addictions and stuff, and it just tore our family apart and things like that. But yeah, I've just seen seen a lot of Russian adoptees or like even American adoptees who are like either told they're never adopted and then they find out from a DNA test and like and then lose contact with their families, or the ones who are adopted and then their adopted family gets to have kids of their own and then they're treated as like maids for the rest of
Yeah.
their life until they're age out of the house. I had a friend who was treated like that. She was kicked out at 15, and then I don't know where she passed away. She got hit by a truck
Oh,
while skiing.
oh dear.
It was the truck's fault. He was drunk driving. I don't know how he ended up in a ski slope, but I don't know what happened. But yeah, that I also feel like having trauma from adopted family also made me grow as a person, made me realize that this is how my dad treated my mom and us. I don't want like my future partner to do the same thing to me or to my children if I ever have any.
Right.
I don't think I can because of certain things that happened to me. But yeah, it's just I feel like a lot of people who aren't adopted have like such positive views on adoption, and then the ones who are adopted, it's like 50-50.
Yes. So that's a really good point because we've been interviewing so many adoptees and it's very split where there are many adoptees who are very grateful and they say, my biological family is not my family. My adoptive family is my family. And that's often because they have a very positive experience, right? And I just interviewed someone. His name is Howard. He's fantastic. I definitely recommend that everyone goes and listens to that episode. He was making the point about when an adoptee is raised in a loving community, in a loving household, in an accepting community and an accepting household and family, they have a more positive outlook on the adoptive family and less likely to have an attachment to the biological family because they say, this is my family. So his experience was that he had less of an attachment to the biological family, didn't want to know about it until his sister, his adoptive sister, who wanted to find her family, looked into hers and encouraged him to look into his. And he was lucky because he had a very positive experience with that, right? And it was very cool for him and it was very interesting. But that's not always the case. And there are other adoptees that I know and have interviewed who say, I want nothing to do with my biological family. Or they say, I want to know everything about my biological family. It kills me that I don't know anything about my biological family. And I understand both sides, especially now that both of my adoptive parents are gone. I have a relationship with my biological brother. I get it, right? Where you want that relationship. Now, I want to go back to your biological mother for a second, because when I met my biological mother, she didn't feel like my mom. She felt like a person. She was just this person. She was the person who birthed me. And I came to this conclusion that my mom was my adoptive mom because she raised me. It's one thing to give birth to a person. It's a totally different thing to raise a child, right? And I again, please don't get offended by what I'm saying. I'm kind of at a lack for a better way of saying it. But I hope you all understand the sentiment I'm trying to convey.
I have a similar feeling because
Yeah.
with the interactions I've had with her and the way she talks about my other sister, it makes me feel like a stranger in her family, not really like someone that she gave birth to. And then when I did, my adoptive mom knows I've met them and everything. Well, I wouldn't say met them, but like found them and tried to communicate with them. And she's very supportive of it. And she's been like, I would not really want to continue. If this was me finding my biological family, if I would not want to continue this relationship, this is how they're treating you or playing words around and stuff.
And it makes sense because again, it's a sort of emotional and mental turmoil that you go through.
And I've asked some other people about it, and some other people, and some of them have been like, "Oh, this is like your mother's trauma response to everything she went through, and then realizing 23 years later that you're still alive, and still she's treating you as a stranger because she's still not over the fact that you're still alive or something like that.
I don't think that's what it is. I have to be honest. I think sorry, I don't know if anyone listening is somebody who said this, but I don't feel that that's what it is. To me, when you mentioned it, I feel that it's a different type of trauma response. In a way that we have abandonment issues, she also has abandonment issues, right? Where, like you said, you didn't message her for days or whatever it was because you were busy, and she got angry at you. That reaction is not a normal reaction. So she felt that you were choosing your adoptive family over her when you were really just at work and you couldn't talk.
And she did say that she didn't want my adoptive family knowing that I found her. She wanted to kind of
Right.
be like her being a secret, because I know like what her view of it is. She probably doesn't want my relationship with my adoptive family going away from her relationship, my building my relationship with her.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, just don't tell your parents that like you found me or like are talking with me. I don't know how they'll feel about it.
That's a good point though, because I remember telling my adoptive parents when I found my family, and they freaked out. They were like, they're scammers, this is bad, like it's not real. You know, your adoptive family is very worried about losing you because they love you and you have a good relationship with your mom and your sister. So you're very important to them.
Kind of go that route. She was like, well, make sure that it's really done. Like, ask some questions like, is this like what happened? And if things are like correlating with what you know from your adoption, then this could be true. The only things that I know really matched was the passport numbers, her birth date, and her birth certificate. Everything else just didn't make sense at all from what what mom said.
I mean, all of that is kind of important. But again, I think you've touched on a very important subject of people and their reactions to their own adoption, right? And I think it's okay if we as an adopted community, we need to understand that it is okay if you are accepting of your adoption and you are comfortable with that and you are comfortable loving your adopted family, but it's also okay to be hurt, to be upset. And it is always my hope that people who do experience those feelings, because I used to feel that way. I totally understand where you're coming from. I've now moved over to the other side a little bit more because I've grown. I always hope that through our journey in life as adoptees, we grow to have a more broad understanding of different things, you know, and different situations. And, you know, we don't know everything that happened. We don't know necessarily what is going on. And I don't, you know, do you feel like your adoption defines who you are as a person?
I don't think the adoption itself defines me as a person. I think it's the entire process of like what I went through from childhood to adulthood defines me as it. Because like, if I honestly, I probably would have the same views if even if I was adopted in a Russian family and not an American family too, probably. And my sister and I both have very different views on my adopted sister. Like she has, I don't know if it's her disability, but she has the theory that my adoptive parents gave birth to her, even though like we have pictures of her adoption and all her paperwork. She thinks, oh, these are my birth parents. They carried me for like 10 months and everything. And I did when she was younger. I was like, oh, do you know that you're from Russia? And she was just like, what? I'm from Russia? Since when? Like she didn't even know anything.
No, I get it. I get that. And like, it's traumatic because she wanted to believe one thing and then she found out another thing. But so in what ways do you see yourself moving forward?
I would say not defining my. I would say not really relying on my adoption as my entire personality, and finding, I guess, other experience, finding more relatable experiences with people, not just for adoption, to help me grow. as a person, because I know in the past, even with other adoptees, a lot of us trauma bond through adoption, and those are not the healthiest relationships. And so I want to grow and not really trauma bond with people.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I think you're on a beautiful transformational journey. You just need to be open to it. That's the first step. And you'll get there. You'll get there.
I do sometimes have negative views about adoption and wish it was like altogether like people should be returned to their families and not just adopted by strangers. There have been times where I have those views, but then I'm like, with how like certain biological families are, it's the safest route to give them to someone else.
Right. Yeah, totally agree with you on that one.
Just let them live in, yeah, when I was younger, I'd be so upset. Like, why was I left my country, forced to like forget my language? I was lucky to grow in a community where there are a lot of Russians, so I was able to take Russian courses and learn a little bit. But I kind of stopped doing that when I was like 16, and I lost it all again.
Right.
But yeah, it's just the whole like culture and losing my culture and learning a new culture is probably what the most difficult part for me was.
Right. No, I get that because I'm also trying to relearn Russian and relearn the culture and everything like that. It's much harder in your adult years.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, my mom said I learned English in like 6-7 months, and I'm like, how did I learn English in 6 to 7 months, but can't learn Russian after, even though I spoke it for 7 years?
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel you. I'm right there with you. Oh my God.
But the good thing is I do dream in Russian. Like I do have like my mom has videos of me like speaking in Russian when I'm sleeping. So like I like in the back of my brain I know Russian. It's just like why can't I know it when I'm awake?
Yeah, I feel you. I love that. That's a really unique quirk. I've never heard that from anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, she has a YouTube channel of me when I was like younger. I used to sing a lot and hula hoop. And so it's kind of fun going back to like seeing what I was when I first came to the US, comparing me to now. And like,
Right.
because literally all the videos, I don't speak any English, just Russian. And the only half the videos are just me interacting with my dog rather than anybody in my family.
Oh, I love that. But thank you all for joining me on this episode of Chats with Kat. A very, very special thank you to our guest, Rita. Everyone stay tuned for another episode of Chats with Kat on the Voice of Adoptees podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and share this episode so that Rita's voice and story can be heard. Be sure to check out our Patreon page and leave us with feedback about our episodes on our website. And always remember, fellow adoptees, someone somewhere is thinking of you. You are not alone.